Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours Saturday. It's great to have you here. If you're watching us on YouTube and want to find out more about what we do, just head over to officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion around media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, it's a whole second hour of Q&A. So if you've got questions, fire up Makana, get those questions into us, vote on the others, and live chat with the other producers. If you're not yet in Makana, we've got the place for you, askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, the easiest way 24/7 to get those questions off the top of your mind. And in front of our panel, there's also a QR code right here you can get get there, or again, askofficehours.global. Speaking of questions, let's dive right in. TJ, what's we got?
Andy Quokendorfer from Vieira, Florida says, Elgato just sent out a promo for 2.1 capture card to be released on February 1st. I assume that they mean the HDMI 2.1 spec.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably a 4K solution. And a lot of the things that Twitch is doing, Twitch has really talked more about it than most companies about the expense of live streaming and the expense specifically of transcoding. Transcoding, and Colleen Henry talked a little bit about it. We had a little fireside chat on last Thursday. You can find that on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. But she talked a little bit about it. You know, transcoding is expensive. And so one of the things that that Twitch is doing is moving towards actually doing the encode from your own computer. So that's going to have a higher quality stream. There won't be two transcodes because they're going to be basically you'll have a server defined encode, which means that you will check in, your software will check into Twitch and go, Twitch will tell you what you want, and you'll send out all 4 or 5 streams or up to 3 streams out to Twitch, which means it'll be a higher quality signal. That also opens the door for 4K. I mean, now I got to tell you, 4K, when I started buying into 4K encoders, the first 2 were 600s. These are Elemental 600s, and I called them Tesla 1 and Tesla 2 because I could have owned 2 Teslas. So they were about, I think they were like $100,000 a unit. And so anyway, nowadays our Mac Minis can do it. So not that I'm bitter about that. And so, but I think that, so what we're looking at is the Elgato is going to be able to serve 4K into things like Twitch streams and you're going to see more and more support. Now, I think that YouTube has supported 4K streaming, just to put in perspective, for 7 years now. So it's YouTube. This is old hat for YouTube, but for Twitch, this will be new, and I think that that's where Elgato is probably focused.
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, this here is really targeted towards gamers, as far as I can see. And we don't really know the specs of this yet, but some notes that were from October, then it looked like it was a 120 frame capture of the... They already have the 60 frame capture of this of the different cards, but it's a 120 frame.
Oh,
Next
that's
question.
interesting.
Oh,
sorry, that's that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying that's really interesting that it's doing 120 frame capture. That means that Twitch, again, if it can actually stream 120 frames, we have to remember that all of our TVs are capable of 120 frames per second right now.
And it also noted on the card notes that there was 8K pass-through. So does that mean that the computer's getting it, or how much?
I mean, this is the 8K is the next edge. The problem is you really need to be within 10 feet of an 85-inch screen to be able to see the difference between 8K and 4K. So that's
well, the 8K goes through and out on the other side, so you can connect to something else, while the card only captures 4K.
So it's just passing through. Yeah, so you could have your 8K. I don't know why you would play games at 8K, but that's great. I mean, the problem with playing games at 8K is that it puts so much pressure. It's 4 times as much pressure on your GPU as the 4K version, and I don't think that you will see much more while playing a game in most environments. So it's cute, but I'm not sure whether that 8K would make a difference in that environment.
Next question.
Khaled Al-Jamaya from Hassa, Saudi Arabia says, good morning. Someone asked yesterday about remotely shutting down or controlling a computer. You might find PiKVM to be a good solution. It's a KVM over IP built on a Raspberry Pi.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that'll probably work for you. But the one question I have is, if you have a KVM designed to shut down a computer, how do you turn it back on? Because once it's shut down, it's not responding to the KVM anymore unless you have Wake on LAN tied to it. Maybe a better solution was, if you have a Pi, is to just use a GPI, and you're going to have to custom rig, do a little wiring, and wire up the a contact closure on the Raspberry Pi to the power on, power off push button on the mini PC. That way you could turn it on and turn it off by just closing a relay on the Pi rather than to communicate over a KVM.
Alex?
And can PCs do this? I mean, on a Mac, we would just tell the computer to restart on power loss. Could you do that is that bad for the PC? I don't know if it's bad for like on a Mac, it doesn't really care. So so what you would do here instead of this, what you would do is you would set it to, anything that that supplies the power to the computer, and just use a shortcut or something else to just turn it off. And you just turn the computer off. And then when you turn it back on, it flips the computer back on, and Mac won't care, but I don't know if a PC will or not.
There's a setting in most of those the Melees, the mini PCs. You can set it to boot up on power restore automatically. It's a BIOS setting. You just go into the BIOS and turn it on. But then you have to make sure that the outlet that you have it plugged into, you have control over that via some wireless remote.
Samuel?
Yeah, well, regarding the PC, definitely, as Courtney says, you can set it to power up automatically when you turn on the power. But also, I use this not for mission critical things or anything that I do production on, but just for computers that I use for to show NDI feed from another system. Actually to older VGA system, and I just turn off the power and turn it on again, and it wrote a little script that fires up vMix, and it works just fine. But I wouldn't do it for a mission critical system.
Courtney?
Yeah, and the other thing you got to worry about is shutting it down without knowing what state the computer's in. If you're just pulling the plug on the power, it could be writing something to the hard drive in the middle of writing something to the hard drive. So you kind of want to shut it down with a keystroke that says shut down so that the computer shuts down naturally. If you just pull the plug, it'll turn on automatically when it comes back on if it hasn't damaged the boot sector that it was writing to when you disconnected the power.
Is that as much of an issue with SSDs as it is with spinning drives?
Well, it's just less of a chance because it writes a lot faster. It can still be writing to that SSD and bung a sector because you removed the power while it was writing to that sector. I guess it's a little less of a problem because you don't have a spinning drive that changes speed.
You could also build something that is it checks the system before it powers down. It checks the system. The hard part is once you turn the computer off, what I find is once you turn the computer off, as you said, it's hard to turn it back on again. And you don't necessarily want to wire up the, I don't want to change the wiring on my Mac Mini. And so I think that it would be interesting. It could make sure that no major services or the drive isn't running before it then sends the command to turn it off.
Really complex, but yeah, you could do that. The other way is to do a setting in Windows. If it's a Windows PC, is to you can change what the power button does. So if you're doing the contact closure on the power button, like I mentioned earlier, you can have the power button automatically shut down when you just press it once. And so you just close it once and it'll automatically shut down. Or you can have it go to sleep, shut down, whatever, either or do nothing.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida says, thoughts on the new Shure MXW Next 2, 2 wireless transmitter receivers, charger, automix, Dante combined.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it looks like it's halfway between the Microflex and the ULX. That's how they're comparing it anyway. So it's got more channels and potentially a little bit more utilization for the over the Microflex. The challenge with the challenge there, the Microflex has been that it is pretty expensive to get in. So I didn't see the price on Shure's website, so I don't know if the MXW is going to be. It looks very much like it. It's using the DECT platform, and so it'll handle up to 40 mics in the low or the kind of the wider mode, and then 80 if you really squeeze it. I would never go to 80, by the way. I've done that with the Microflex has gone into the high density. And you can really hear it. You can hear the bits, kind of going. In general, what you're going to find is that the DECT format is not going to be as clean as a regular transmitter. So a regular transmission, we used them thinking that they would be, and I grew to notice the difference. And so in the quiet points and in the drop off, you can hear the bits, as it goes through, and as it kind of comes off. So that's the cost. You will not hear it in a corporate event. You will not hear it in the thing. But if you start doing a broadcast with it, and you're really fine tuning it, you are going to hear the difference between an MXW and a ULX or Axion or anything else that's above it. But they're super convenient. You put them in. I can tell you with the Microflex, you drop those mics in, you push a button, and it resets them all. It's a receiver that goes to Dante. It has the automix. All those things the Microflex is. If I was doing corporate stuff and just kind of running through it, the convenience of a Microflex is so great that that fine detail, where you really notice it is if you go into the high density mode, and there it falls apart a bit. And so I don't know if I'm going to guess that the MXW might have the same problems. But again, it's the only place I did ask Shure one time. They were at our office showing us the Microflex before we bought it. It's when you spend $10,000, you can get somebody to come and talk to you about it. I said, "Is there any place that the deck doesn't work?" And they were like, "Plantronics," because all their headsets are on decked. And so it was like Plantronics. You can't use our system in Plantronics. It's the only place we know you can't use it. So,
Courtney.
Yeah, that was interesting, the way that they've built in the oops, sorry. That happens to all of us here.
There you go.
Gosh. Okay. The access point is built into the chargers. So you could put several of these, each of these handhelds or out, and each charger serves as an communications access point around, so people around the office, around the room could pick them up.
I will admit that I'm not that excited about that part of it. I can see how it'd be convenient for two mics. I really like what they do with Microflex, which is just a little box that I can put in the ceiling, like that I'm putting out of the way. I think that I would find, I think oftentimes where I put the charger and where I put the access point might be radically different in choice. And so that'd be my only concern. But I can see how, to Courtney's point, I can see how it would be a very convenient thing for, I got two mics in a room kind of thing.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, would there be any advantage to using a direct box for a keyboard or other electronic instrument if the instrument already has a balanced output?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Mickey said that if you need to feed a pedal board or other hardware that require an instrument input, so that would be the only time. I couldn't think of one. The reason I looked at the chat is I couldn't think of a reason to do that, but Mickey had one.
Next question.
From Dewey Evans in Austin, Texas via the QR code. I'm developing a show which has a talk show and athletic event being switched into multiple boxes simultaneously. Would I be better off using two Emmys on an Atem Constellation or the Constellation Plus, a Television Studio HD8?
Alex?
I would probably, if I could, I'll always use two switchers. You absolutely can run two shows on a 2ME. Here's the problem is a lot of times you want services on that 2ME. So when you think of a 2ME, you want to think about the fact that you might be wanting to be able to cut. You might want to go to a super source and you may want to change that input and cut it. So what you end up doing is taking that second ME and that main super source window oftentimes is looking at the second ME, which you're then switching and adding graphics and doing other things. So a lot of times you want more, the reason that you want more ME is not so much that you're cutting multiple shows or multiple feeds, but you want to have other services that you're kind of feeding into that. So I'd be a little careful of trying to do it. We've definitely done it. We've used two MEs, four MEs, et cetera, cut two rooms at the same time, cut two shows at the same time, where we have the most popular way or the most common way that we use the constellations in the multiple MEs is that I might cut an IMAG show for the room and cut a web show for the difference between those cuts is oftentimes you have the IMAGs, but in the second one you're adding some lower thirds, you're adding wide shots, you're adding other things to the show that goes out. What I will say about that is that it's very hard for a TD will tell you they can do both shows. It's very hard for them to do both shows well. So they'll always, I can do both of them at the same time, and they're a little distracted. Like it's never as good as having two TDs. two good TDs. If you have one bad TD doing the web one, it's better to just have the good TD do it. You can't have, by the way, you can't have the second feed calling the cameras or having the second set of cameras. They run the wides, and you let the main TD run the iMag, and then you just take that iMag feed into the second switcher, and then you add your wides, add your graphics, add the other things. The other thing you're going to have is that sometimes you're going to play stuff into the room that can't go out to the web, and that can be the audio, it can be the video, and so being able to feed that into that second switcher is useful. I would lean towards having two separate switchers. Now, you can also, to make it a little more complicated, you could have two TDs talk to the same switcher. So the ATEM switcher will take up to 5 guests to talk to it. So you can have, we've done it where we've actually given two TDs, 2 different panels. The real danger you get into is that you can't lock one out of the other one. So you can end up with a TD accidentally cutting. You can end up with a TD actually cutting the other TD show, which is not a good thing. So you got to be kind of careful of that. Again, I tend to want to separate those out. I tend to want to think about the web show as a separate show, especially now it's becoming more and more important because 90% of your viewers are online. So they're not, it used to be when I started, 90% of my viewers or 99% of my viewers were in the room. And that has flipped over, especially over COVID, but over the last 10 years, that's really become, your online audience is becoming more and more important. And so as a result, you need to put more and more energy into it.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana says, calling all ATEM Mini Lovers. What do you think of this $300 USB dongle? Does anyone have one? Does it meet a need?
Alex?
I am, sorry, I got caught up in the, I didn't read it fast enough here, so we're going to pull it up here. This is a multimedia adapter.
It's a video. I looked at it. It's really hard to grok it in a short period of time.
Yeah.
It's a hub. It's a USB-C hub that plugs into designed for the USB-C output of ATEM Mini Pro that I believe turns it.
So your webcam can you can use UVC
you can pull the webcam
and it goes
out to multiple things.
That's a
I don't know how that works.
So OBS makes, OBSBot makes one of these. It doesn't quite go out to so many things, so maybe this is better for that. But the OBSBot makes an HDMI to UVC to HDMI converter. The real problem is that I can't. CJ's got it there. The real problem with that is that for me is that I want to control the cameras and the UVC controls don't go back. What someone really needs to build, that maybe this does, but I haven't seen it, is I can't send the controls. What I want is a USB to my computer so that my software can control that camera and an HDMI out to the switcher so that I can do that. And I haven't seen anything that has successfully done that. And that is the thing that I'm looking for, and I'd be super interested in that.
Nigel?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know I'd answered this question, so I withdraw my question.
So this little OBSBot piece has a USB port in it, and so you can plug in a little UC transmitter to control an OBSBot with an OBSBot remote, but it should just be a pass-through that lets you tweak it with the computer.
Yeah, because the problem is you can't get to the software. So I don't want to connect it to an OBSBot. What I want to do is connect it to my Insta 360 and be able to move it around and then have it still be in my that would be gold, but it doesn't work.
Courtney?
Yeah, and also because it's a USB-C hub, it allows you to use the USB-C output for video and still record, so that you can plug an SSD drive, a USB-C SSD drive into that hub, and still record and use the UVC output to a monitor or to a computer, I guess.
Next question.
Lalak Lopez Waterman from Orlando, Florida says, has Apple mentioned a way to let your friends try out the Vision Pro? It seems like they are so bespoke. Are they not worried about wide adoption as much as boutique adoption?
Nigel?
I don't think they're worried about that at this point at all. What they're worried about is getting this thing into the market, having the developers and early adopters play with it. I think a device that I can share with my wife or somebody else is probably not the first generation idea. By the way, I do think it's interesting if you look at all the reviews for the product, and I got as far as the faced thing and then I backed out. Too much money. But I do think it's interesting looking at the reviews on this thing that people miss that this is a very early product. In like 15 minutes, they did $250 million worth of sales on something that, they just launched, which is a pretty good business to start with, regardless of how much it costs to build. But again, don't look at the first version as the end game. Look at this as the start of the process. And I'm sure by version 2 or 3, they'll have interchangeable things that allow multiple people to use it. But I don't think that's what they were worried about at this point.
Alex?
I think that Apple may be approaching this as a phone. Like, I don't know a lot of people that share their phone around. I don't. so it's hard to get me to let someone else hold my phone, let alone do anything else. And so you'll see me tend to say, here's a picture and I'll show it to you. I won't hand you my phone. And so I think that I think that Apple may be viewing it that way. We're in the beginning of a 20-year curve. 10 years has already happened of them getting to the point where they're releasing this. And there's going to be another 10 years of them rolling out what they think is probably going to be a little thicker than these glasses. That's the rumor. Right now, this is really the Model A, Model T, rolling out of the system for them to figure out. How will people use it? What will they do with it? What are they going to? Where is that going to go? So I think that's what Apple's kind of working its way through at the moment. And so I think that's where, I think that I don't think they had 80. The rumor is they had 80,000 to sell the first day. They probably sold all of them. I don't know. Someone can try to look at what the delay is now. I'd be really interested. You can't order this. What? It's early March now?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's starting to stretch out, and so you'll see that date continue to stretch out. That means they probably moved the first 80,000 pretty quickly, and so the rumor is they can't sell more than 500,000 even if they wanted to. So, so I think that the first couple of years, just the build is going to be hard. So I think that you're really at the very beginning. I think they really are looking at it as a boutique. But the interesting thing is people will say, well, there's not a market for that. Well, it's 80,000 people that just spent $4,000. Mine was like I got the 1 terabyte and I got the prescription glasses and everything else, and the dust settled. It was a little over $4,000. And Apple is going to, they're looking at, there's 80,000 people spend a lot of money. If I did a concert, for instance, the chances of a live concert to the headset, which I'm working on, the chances of a lot of people, more than most of our live streams here, signing up and paying to watch it will be very high because they're trying to experiment with what they're doing. So I think that there's still a big market. I was talking to a developer who said, well, the market isn't big enough. I'm like, well, how many times have you sold 80,000 units of your product? And they're like, wow. I was like, how many times have you sold $1,000 units of your product? Like, probably a market there for you. So anyway, it'll be really interesting to see. And I think that Apple's going to be really hungry to promote custom solutions for that headset. So you're going to be on that app store if you're building something great. And so I think it's going to be interesting.
And I did want to throw in the Verge reported a couple days ago that there is a guest mode that you can enable on the Vision Pro that allows someone else to try it, but it locks down some of the experiences, turns off Optic ID, doesn't let them into your private stuff. You just got to remember, everybody who bought one had to scan their face. So
you can't even buy it without a phone.
Right.
Like you can't buy it without an iPhone. Like you can't buy, even if you wanted to, you can't, because when you go to the website, it says, "Hey, I need to scan your face." For that, yeah.
So if the person with whom you're sharing has a different sized face than you, you're going to need to buy a second light shield. Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at the initial sales of this because there's been a lot of pent-up demand of every single Apple fanboy out there who wants to be the first on their block to review it and get it up on their YouTube website. So just in the influencers alone, you're going to sell out that first round of manufacturing just to hit the influencers, much less the rest of the people that may want to get one. So I'd treat those initial sales as just, that's going to be an unnatural bump in sales, and then it will level off. I think in all the demos of it and all the promotions I've seen for it, I haven't seen a single thing that is a killer app that would mean that, hey, this only works on the Vision Pro, and there's no other way to accomplish this task without this spatial video, et cetera, et cetera. there's vertical market applications for that, but that's not a big market. I mean, HoloLens has been out there for, 8 years now? They're still selling it. It's about the same price, $3,500. Do they sell a lot of them? No. They sell them to, they have government contracts and, people repairing jet engines and situations where you might need AR overlay. It's a neat demo. It's a really incredible demo. But after the demo's over and you go, okay, time to sit down and get some work done, how long are you going to want to sit there with that thing on your face doing your regular work? And is it any better than your situation now with maybe a 42-inch monitor in front of you and 8K monitor in front of you, and a nice keyboard that you can type on instead of doing the crab claw thing?
Alex?
Yeah, when the iPhone came out, it didn't do anything that a Trio couldn't do. The feature set was exactly the same. The Trio, I could go on my Trio and go on the internet, and I could make phone calls, and I could, all those things that Steve Jobs was so proud of. I could watch little movies on it and everything else. What it did is it made it way better, and it changed the entire way we think about those things. And so I think when we look at the other headsets, many of which I have, the real problem with most of the headsets isn't so much. I mean, the video quality is pretty good. There's some features. There's two things that are really missing for me, and why I don't use those headsets very often. Number one is the prescription thing, which has been an issue. But that's a different one. But number one is the interface has always been painful. So if Apple has fixed a lot of the interface stuff, the interface on most of these things, you're like trying to even show it to somebody else. There's all these weird buttons, and even you get lost in the interface, and you have to kind of figure it out. It's not well done. And when I look at the demos of Apple, as someone who's owned most of these in the past, or worked with them or developed content for them, the interface that Apple is proposing is dramatically better than everybody else's. And that makes a huge difference in how people are going to, because the interface affects how people use the product. They use the product because the interface makes it easy to use the product in that way. And I think that Apple generally does that way better than everybody else. Because I think that a lot of times, like as a Mac user, when I open a PC and it has the same features, but it has all these weird fiddly buttons, and you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, like go to design school, and it's not just the OS, it's all the apps built for it are just goofy and weird, and there's all these weird buttons, and there's no sense of style, So and that style makes a difference because you want to minimize what people are, you want to give them what they need as they need it, and so I think I think that's what Apple's going to do. But again, Apple doesn't care how many. There's 2.8 million iOS developers. Just that market is enough to sell the next 3 years of what they can actually produce. So just the developers, and then you have the influencers, and then you have the people who want to be the cool kid on the block. There's enough there to sell 3-4 years of this until the next, so they're not trying to impress anybody other than the buzz will be around because the kids who got it all their friends will want to know what happened. And I'm asking friends that have it or have had tested it, like, okay, what's it like? And they're like, it's heavy. No one's complaining about they're like, everything is amazing, but it's heavy. But no one's had the headset with the top strap. They don't ship that out, or they don't let anyone test it with the top strap. And so that's a new thing that we're gonna see what happens.
Nigel?
Yeah, Apple's a product business. I don't know what the break-even point on the number of units they're going to have to produce to have made this worthwhile, because they don't know what the development costs were, and I'm sure the development costs were billions, but if they do 500,000 units this year, they're already into the billions. So what none of us knows is what the break-even point is. So it's really hard to judge as a business idea unless you know that. There's two other...
Go ahead.
So two other quick points. The other advantage Apple has is that they're Apple, and they will bring marketing and ecosystem pressure to bear in a way that the other products that have entered the market can't do it. I'll say the third thing I would quickly say, that when Mr. Benz or Herr Benz produced the first motor car in 1885, people said there's nothing you can't do with that, with a horse. It doesn't go that far, very noisy. And I think the card's been quite successful. So I really would encourage us to remember we're just at the very start, at the beginning of the rollout of these products.
Alex?
Yeah, and I think I think Apple's looking for they're looking to turn a profit in year 5 or 6. Like I don't think that they're trying to turn it, like that's when the mass market. I think that they're just going to burn. This is their next platform. Like, be clear, like this is not their this is not an Apple TV. It's not a hobby. It's not a, let's see how this goes. They're going to plow billions and billions of dollars into this over the next 5 years. But they're not looking. I don't think that they're even looking for profit. They're looking for being the next thing that everybody's using. And I will say that there's still tech that I haven't seen happen, in all this time that I've had, that I saw 25 years ago. So I know, there's a lot of room in this tank, to go a long way in VR that we haven't done yet. So it'll be really interesting to see.
Next question.
Paul Walhus in Starling Plaza, Texas says, 75th Emmys were funny, snappy, and a heartfelt celebration of television as a medium. Do you agree with Wired, Paste Magazine, and others that they are wired and not tired?
Go ahead, Alex.
Lowest viewership ever, which was last year's was the lower than that one. I mean, the reality is that I don't think that most of the award shows, I mean, the Oscars may survive a little bit longer and the Grammys may survive a little bit longer, but we're getting into post-award season. I just don't think that you're going to see them on broadcast because they're not going to be able to make enough money. Their numbers are getting too low. I think it was sub 5 million on this last 4.3 or something like that million viewers. And so I think that the era of that, I think they're just tired of it, and I think that they made the mistake of really turning these into political places to stand, and they've been doing that for a long time, but they made it like commonplace. And I think huge chunks of the audience just decided not to play anymore. And I think that was, we try to stay away from politics here, and they should have too. So they, and so the politics has probably carved 30 to 50% of their audience out. Because no one wants to see them, no one in certain huge chunks of our country want to watch the awards anymore. And that cut, that affects your bottom line over time. And when 30 to 50% of the people won't go, or won't watch out of spite, you're in trouble. And I think that's the challenge they're going to have.
Nigel?
I think the entertainment ecosystems are changing dramatically. I was talking to my mother yesterday, and she said, well, we haven't been to the cinema in 2 or 3 years. And I said, that's because nothing you want to watch is at the cinema anymore. All of the art house movies, all of the foreign film, they're all on streaming. And of course, they're not very into the streaming thing. So the whole ecosystem around the way that broadcast and television created excitement, and the magazines, maybe not Wired, but the other ones were part of that ecosystem. And now we stream on demand. That ecosystem is starting to fall apart. So even without the politics, which I think did exactly what Alex said it did, just the way we consume programs and media is changing. It's changed dramatically, and it's changed the way those ecosystems work. And I used to love the Oscars. I used to all of those, but I think trepanning would be more entertaining than it would be to sit through one of those shows with all the adverts and all the stuff. I look at the summary and move on.
Courtney?
Yeah, I agree with Nigel. The industry has changed, the television industry especially. In the 50s and 60s, it was appointment television. Shows were only on the 3 networks, and to see the show, you had to tune in. Everybody had to tune in at the same time every night, and everyone would be talking about what they saw on TV the night before. So viewing schedule was segmented and really anchored in time. And in fact, back then, the Emmys covered all of television, and then it started to spread out so that then there's the daytime Emmy Awards. So the soap operas and everything that's on in the daytime before 5 o'clock gets its own show. Okay, so it split off half of that television audience. And then streaming comes along, and, you don't have appointment television. You don't necessarily watch a show the day it comes out or the evening that it airs. You watch it the next morning, the next day. You binge it on the weekend. So there's no commonality in the buzz that is generated by a new television show because it spreads it out over a length of time, and it doesn't get as much media coverage. And so that's why there's less interest in the awards, and the awards have become so stratified to be, best male first time appearance in a comedy or drama or special. And who can figure out the categories and what category your favorite show is going to be in? And I think all of that has led to the fact that people just aren't interested in watching the awards. They're too complex to figure out. They'll look at them the next day in the paper and say, "Oh, the show we like won 4 Emmy Awards," etc. But the Emmy Awards ceremony itself doesn't attract the kind of audience that it used to, because we become so stratified in our viewing pleasure and our viewing habits.
Alex?
I also think YouTube impacts it in the sense that most award shows are 90% boring, with 10% or 1% of the time you spend is actually a moment. Like most of it's just like, okay, and they're, run-on sentences and, just kind of like, a list of people that, none of us know who they are, but it's important for them to say that because they hired them. All those things are there. And so it's really, really boring. And then there's 1 or 2% of like some moment that, Short Round, had a moment on last Oscars, right? so everybody's, looking at that. But we get to see all of that in YouTube almost in real time. So right after the show, all the highlights are going to be there. Why slug through all of the boring parts when you can just jump on and get to the, just see the 6 things that were worth watching and go, oh, that was great. And then you move on, and I think that's really the problem. And I do agree with Courtney. I just think we're not watching all this. We're so many different behaviors. I rarely watch anything new anymore. Like I mostly am watching older things. I don't want to commit, I think because of Game of Thrones mostly, I don't want to commit to a season. I don't want to commit to a show, to watch a show until I see that the last year of it is a year before this year. I want to know that it got through the end of the seasons, and then I kind of go, well, did people like the way it ended? Because I don't want to dig into 5 years worth of content, and then have it turn out like Game of Thrones. And but I think that the other thing is more. I talked to somebody. I don't know how many people do that, but I can't stand, like, now they're doing this thing where they put them out once a week like the old days. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I just have to wait until that season ends or wait until the whole series ends so I can watch it, because it's so annoying to wait a year, wait a week, like, I'm just like, there's so much back catalog of other shows I can watch that are all there already. I'd rather just use that. And so I think that the whole industry has disjointed itself into the place where most people haven't even seen these shows.
I can't agree with you more on the lamenting the return of the week-long pause. My wife and I are watching Reacher, and we're binging it, and then we get to the end, we're like, wait. Oh, there's one more. It's okay.
And you can't forget. You forget what happened. Like, what's great about a series that's already out is that you watch one a night, and then you remember everything. Like, when you spread it out a week, it actually drops the enjoyment of the show by like 90%, because you
disinvested from all those subplots and all the little intricacies
of all the plots. But when they're a week apart, when they're a day apart, my problem is with like Reacher. We started watching it, but only my son and I watch it. So we have to find a certain time to watch it because the women don't want to watch it. And so then we forget. And then it's like 3 or 4 weeks. And then we're like, oh, right, we haven't watched it for 3 or 4 weeks. And then we watch them a day apart. But I get why they do that. I think that I was talking to someone about this yesterday. I really think it'll be interesting to see what happens. They're all experimenting with live. I really think that live content is going to be very, very useful. And not in just the sports, but if you think about live content as the Q&A. So one of the things that I do is actors talking about their film. They're talking about, I've done hundreds of these where they're either at a theater, they're at the venue, they're at home, they're over Zoom, whatever it is. And they talk about the experience of being in the movie. And they talk about the movie. The director talks about the movie, and they answer some questions from the audience, and they blah, 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 blah. That is so cheap to do per minute compared to the film, or the TV show. And what it does, though, is it adds extra content for the people. The game you're trying to play all the time is how do you keep people subscribed? If Disney was doing one of those a day, which would be the cost of one of those a day for a year, would be the cost of like one episode of Mandalorian. Like it, like just to be clear, like it's it's so tiny. But if you did every day from a different piece, and even go back into the history, we did a roundtable. If you go up to YouTube and you look for the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back, there's a bunch of the folks that worked on the visual effects from ILM. And it's like Lauren Peterson and Phil Tippett and Dennis Murin and Joe Jackson and they all of those folks are talking about it. It was a great hour and a half that we had we had them talking about it. I would subscribe if I knew that kind of stuff was happening every day or every week or whatever, and that I could ask questions like we do here in the show and everything else. It'd be a really, that'd be valuable for $8 a month. And it does, and there's so little cost, like so little cost to the folks. And instead we get these like behind the scenes things from The Mandalorian, which are way overproduced. And, it's like, and they're really expensive to do, and they don't have to be that expensive. And so I think that kind of content, could add some value to the subscription. And then we could just go back to putting the whole season out at one time.
The only thing that I'm bummed about the award shows kind of receding is that I don't necessarily watch the award shows, but I like to hear what was nominated and what won almost as a marketing exercise. What are some things that I might have missed? And when something sweeps, all of a sudden I'm paying attention. And so I hope that doesn't go away. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think this ecosystem that was the traditional broadcast television, the magazines, has moved to YouTube. So if you want to see the sort of behind-the-scenes conversations about Reacher, go find Rosenblum or one of the other podcasts he's done, and you'll find that content is there. So there's an ecosystem supporting these products, but it's in new places. It's in places like YouTube.
And I would just argue that the streamers should take advantage of that and get it into the, if you're Netflix, why have it all be happening by third parties on YouTube? Like you could be doing that as your own content and then release it on YouTube, parts of it or highlights of it on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I was also going to add, I finished Reacher last night, and I know you had...
Don't spoil it. I haven't seen it yet.
No, I won't.
The last 3 episodes.
Lee Chard, I know you had him on Krasny, and I actually was lucky enough to have lunch with him for 2 hours once, which was a really interesting experience. And I will tell you that the biggest disappointment I have with Reacher is they had the chance to go and do this sequentially, but they caught up this idea that they needed to create an ensemble cast because they probably didn't believe Reacher was strong enough on his own. And they've blown a chance to really do the hero's journey. And I understand why they do it. That's just disappointing to me.
Yeah.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think we're all victims in television now of the long story arc. I mean, in the olden days, in original television, each episode would be self-contained. You could tune in one night and tune in 3 weeks later and catch an episode then and not be lost as to, it'd be the same characters, but a different story every single episode that is unrelated to the previous. Every now and then you'd have a to be continued, a 2-parter. Ooh, wow. That was a big thing. Now it's all, 8-parters or nothing. So you don't want to invest. You don't want to come in the middle. So you got to start at the first. So you got to start streaming. If you find out about something and everybody says, oh, it's great. Have you been watching that? No, and you don't want to come in the middle. So I guess I'll wait till it's all done and come in and stream it. So that causes the stratification. And plus, you don't want to start something that has a 4-season story arc. If you have to commit to watching the whole thing if you want to see the story start, middle, and end. So I think that's creating huge problems in the awards area, especially because they give awards for episodes. And, each episode can be directed by a different guy, so they give awards for direction of an episode. And it's tough to find that people watched that episode more than any other episode. So I don't even know how the voting system is going to work across these long story arc shows that have different directors and different writers on each episode.
Alex?
Yeah, there are definitely way more movies now. Like, so Penny Dreadful, Hannah, those are ones that come to the top of my head they wrote them for 3 seasons. Like they wrote the 3 seasons together and they did those and then when they got to the end, they were done. And I think I will admit, with both of those, I look back and go, "Oh, I really wish I could go back to watching more seasons of those." But I get it. I respect the fact that this was the story they wanted to tell. I did talk to someone who works on some of these, a showrunner, and I asked if they liked film or the series, and they're like, "Oh, the series are way better." Like the ability to build characters over time, and for them, 2.5 hours was such a cramped environment of I have to squeeze everything in and I have to hype. There's so many things that you want to talk about, you just can't do in 2.5 hours. And I find myself on the other side of that. We watched what did we watch last night? Hunger Games, the new Hunger Games prequel or whatever, and it's a long movie. And I was just kind of like, it probably felt longer than it should. And I just was like, I don't know if I really like watching movies anymore. Like I don't like sitting down for 2.5 hours. I'd much rather watch 50 minutes to an hour in chunks than I would watching 2.5 hours. And I find myself highly resistant. Like when my family wants to watch a movie, I'm like, do we have to? Like, can we find something that's an hour long? Like, I don't really like the long movies anymore. I'd much rather watch a series.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman from Orlando, Florida asks, do you think it will be possible to walk through an Unreal Engine environment in a Vision Pro, or will the legal feud preempt that?
Alex?
Yeah, I think that the Unreal is going to be able to develop for it. They're just not getting a lot of help from Apple. So you're not going to see Unreal on you're not going to see Epic on the stage for any keynotes anytime soon. So that's really what they gave up, which was may turn out to be a pretty expensive thing to do, given that they got so little out of the law. Now that the Supreme Court has decided we're done, and Apple got what it got, and Epic got what it got, and Epic's going to keep fighting it in Europe, and they maybe make some progress. But that was a really expensive turnaround for Epic. Like I don't think that really worked out for them. And I didn't think it would. I mean, if you watch Mac Breaks, I didn't think it would when it started. so it's not like I was surprised, but it was a super expensive little process there for them, because on top of it, they lost all the sales for Fortnite on the phone, and I think they thought that the users would. They didn't realize that Apple users are kind of like, oh, it's not here anymore. What else is here? like it's not like they're going to go buy an Android. So they're not going to rise up. They're just, and so I think Epic greatly overestimated their market impact, and so but the development tools still work on a Mac, and they'll still work in the headset. Although Apple has partnered much more with Unity than Epic, as it moves forward. I think in the long term, Apple's going to have a lot of its own tools to do this. Like they're not going to probably leave it to an external company anyway. But I don't think they're going to stop Epic from doing stuff that's applied to the headset.
Courtney?
Even if they settle the legal feud, no, you won't be able to walk through the Unreal Engine environment without tripping over your own furniture with the Vision Pro, because, hey, you got to account for that unless you set up a really big room with no furniture in it.
Next question.
Via the QR code, Jeff Lukager from Elkhorn, Wisconsin says, you were just discussing the Office Hours logo. I created 2 preview quality animations for you to view. They are yours for the taking. Let me know if you like them.
Alex?
Yeah, so let me cut through them. Jeff made a couple of these, put them on YouTube. Here's the first one here. Nice little transition. It's fun. And then here's the second one. There are fun effects there. One thing that we're probably going to do is just so you know that, I mean, thank you so much for making these. But I think that we're moving past this logo. So there's another logo that's out there that we're kind of putting together there. So, but keep on thinking about that. I think as we think about 3D, we're probably going to do less of a 2D kind of vectorized or depth logo, and really think about how we have those objects interact. But really fun little process. I'd be curious if you put it up, tell us what you used to do it. There's a lot of good effects there.
Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith from Chautauqua, New York says, has anyone used Raspberry Pis in any part of your production flow? I have a couple of Pi 5s, and I'm hoping to use them as a broadcast monitor, either with NDI in real time or pulling up the event live stream. Thanks.
Samuel?
Yeah, I have used Raspberry Pis a little bit. In fact, you see the monitor behind me now. I'm sending a SRT feed to it from Remix. And I had like this old Raspberry Pi lying around. That's Raspberry Pi 2, probably like 7 or 8 years old. And it runs SRT just fine. Of course, if you're going to do NDI, then NDI is more process intensive, so you need something more powerful. There is an application that's called Decaffeine that can do it. It's free and it's in beta still. I have heard mixed reports on it, so use it at your own risk. I would probably, if you're going to monitor NDI stream, I would probably prefer like a small PC instead. But you can of course test it and see if it works for you. Other applications for using a Raspberry Pi is, for example, Bespoke Companion. You can run as a server for that, and also Jonas's app, Playout Pre runs on quite well on the Raspberry Pis.
Alex?
Yeah, I recommend taking a look at Playout B from Jonas Dottel, and it's a great app that will do a lot of playout for you. As a test one time, I looped it. I was like, I wonder how stable this is. I'm going to set it to a loop, and then I forgot about it. It looped for weeks, perfectly. So and it was always sitting on my switcher. I could always have it there and go. We'll be right back. So Playout B is definitely something to check out. It's not too expensive, and it runs great on a Raspberry Pi.
Next question.
Guy Cochran from Seattle, Washington says, at the highest level, mission-critical event cannot fail. What process, software, hardware would you use to play out pre-recorded videos into a Zoom meeting or webinar?
Alex?
You said highest level. You didn't say for a certain price or anything else. I'm just warning you. EVS. That's what we use. That is what we use. At the highest level for playout for a corporate event, for other things like this, we use an EVS to do that. When it absolutely has to work, when we need to be able to adjust to needs in real time, when we need, now it's tweaky to put it together. It needs reference. It needs to make sure, there's a whole bunch of things that the EVS it's expensive. It costs us about $6,000 a week to rent it. We don't buy them because they're $150,000 each. So the EVS is where, and what's interesting is that event people don't even know EVSs exist. We used to use these in Playout for our, when we did like things on Dreamforce or something like that, we would use the EVS, but the event teams were like, what is that box and why are you using it? And the reason we use it is for A, for playback, and B, for shifting all the seminars. So you're doing a big seminar and you've got a whole bunch of speakers and one's talking a little too long or another one's whatever. And we were able to shift all of the times by a couple minutes to tie it all in. Transformational, transformational to use it. Now, as we go down from there, typically what we use a lot is Softron is another playout system that we use. It's about $2,000. It's not super cheap, but it'll play out 10-bit, which is important to us. It'll also activate Dante. You go out of Dante. So we've played Softron like 10-bit 4K with 37 channels of audio because we had surround with changing things out and so on and so forth. So I think that those are that's the next piece of software. Hyperdecks are something that we do use. They're a little less flexible, but usually when you hit play, they're going to usually play what you want. If you played it once, it'll play it again. No, sometimes it won't play it at first. So you have to, and they're tweaky about kind of loading them in. QLab is another one that we look at. So those are some of the ones that we start to work at for those really high end playouts.
Courtney?
Yeah, for hardware only, either Hyperdeck or KeyPro works most of the time. But in all situations, and I've done a lot of these big Disney events, corporate events, for Walt Disney Productions, and they always they'll play back out of Keynote, out of a Mac Pro, but they'll always have a second Mac Pro online, plugged in, and in sync with the current presentation, so that if anything happens to that one Mac Pro, they can switch over to the second one. And the same thing with a lot of the hardware playbacks as well. You always have a backup there loaded with the same material that you can get to and start in case something crashes.
Alex?
And oftentimes when we do it, we can't quite get to a point where we can afford two EVSs for one show. So a lot of times, we do sometimes have a single operator on an EVS with two EVS systems, a primary and a backup to do that. The other thing that we do is oftentimes have our software like Softron or something else like that be the backup from, and this is Softron on air. I think is the there's a bunch of different Softron products, so that's a company. But but oftentimes our software is our backup. I would not recommend. I use Keynote all the time. I do not recommend playing a lot of videos out of Keynote. You get a lot of frame loss and so on and so forth. So as a quick example, it's fine. But if you're saying, oh, I really want you to watch this, Keynote is not the place that I would use for Playout. What we typically do is we'll have a Keynote dock. Oftentimes that Keynote dock will come with the movies that they want to show. But what we do is we take those frames out and we cut to our playback. So we would cut to a playback system that's designed for that. In the old days for corporate events, it was all Playback Pro, because Playback Pro would guarantee those frames and guarantee the resolution. The hard part is that Playback Pro wrote their own drivers and everything else for the output from the Mac, and that meant that they were way ahead of everybody else. So they became the standard everywhere backstage. You see Playback Pro everywhere. The problem was as Apple updated their operating systems, Playback Pro couldn't keep up. And Apple got much better at doing it on their own, and so it they kind of faded. But that was really the standard for a lot of time.
Next question.
Jeff Veely from Henderson, Texas says, I'm seeking a new headset mic for speaking at virtual events. My current slimline mic gets caught on my beard, creating noise. Thoughts on this mic? Recommendations on the pickup pattern? The Countryman ISOMAX with AX connector.
Alex.
In general, I'm a big fan of Countryman. I mean, I think that the thing you want to look at is especially if you have a beard, is how you're getting to what you have in front of you. So these are these ISOMAX. There's you have the trouble with the Countryman in general on the cardioids. Any of these headsets, when you start using these cardioid, is that they have a lot of sibilance. More so than other things. And if you get them a little off, so you want to make sure that they go over both ears. The Countryman really came out with a single ear and stuck with it for a long time. And a lot of us ended up moving to DPAs. And the reason for that was that the Countryman would, once it got off, it swung out here like this, especially if it's a directional mic, cardioid. It would be, you couldn't hear anything, and so that was really problematic for us. So you want to think about what I'm a big fan of Countryman. And DPAs, those are the two that I probably use the most. DPAs have a little better bass response, in my opinion, than the Countrymans, but they're also oftentimes 50% more expensive.
Go ahead, Harshid.
He covered it pretty well there, and some brands to look at is Bear Dynamic and as well as Audio Technica for if you're looking for something in a reasonable range. Remote audio also sources some good headsets with great microphones. So those are just some brands to take a look at, but DPA is definitely a golden choice for everybody.
Alex?
And the thing to remember is that you have, and while the ISOMAX is available on both cardioid and Omni, what I do to get it out there is I will put my thumb right where it comes out of my ear here, and I'll take my index finger and I'll just pull it out like this. So I'm going to bend it there, and then if someone that I'm working with has a beard, I'm going to have them make sure that it clears the beard, and then we're going to bend it back in. Where we want it to sit is just a little behind the corner of the mouth, so it doesn't get any plosives on it. But you got to clear that beard. You can't have it go through you can't expect anything to work if it's touching your hair follicles. So those are you have to get it out there. These are generally very and a lot of times when we see people with beards, while I'm not a big fan of labs, and how they sound, the one place that we have a tendency to break back to WL 184s or 85s are when we see beards, because we're just not sure whether we're going to be able to get it set up in time to make that work.
Samuel, real quick.
Yeah, and we've used a company called MyPro. It's what it is. It's a bigger boom than the other ones, so you can say that it will. It's a bigger boom, so it's more rugged than the Countryman.
All right, thank you very much. As we approach the top of the hour, we'd like to remind everyone the show is driven by your questions. So if you've got some questions floating around in your head, now's a great time to throw them into Makana, or by going to askofficehours.global. You can also hit the QR code that hops up on the screen sometimes, or again, just go to askofficehours.global 24/7. Get those questions in. Immediately, or I should say 9 o'clock Pacific, noon Eastern, today is the new Office Hours Volunteers meeting. So if you've been watching the show thinking, hey, I wonder how that works, or hey, I think I could help there, or I think I could have a lot of fun doing that, this is a meeting to learn about what it takes to be a volunteer and some of the opportunities there are to help. There's a ton of people who work on the back end to make the show possible every day, and I know I'm thankful for them because they're out here making us look and sound good, and you can too. So let's hop into the second hour. Thanks. And welcome back. We've got a whole second hour of Q&A coming right up, so why don't we head up into the next question?
From Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. Deborah says, do you still get magazine subscriptions in the mail? If so, which ones?
Go ahead, Nigel.
I get two. I get two industry trade magazines for the industry that I work in. I invariably never read them. I throw them away. They are free. I have to tell you that the magazines I always subscribe to, were great. I do quite a lot of flying and still do. They were great for takeoff and landing when you couldn't use your devices. Now you pretty much can use your devices. You pretty much have Wi-Fi. So that was my magazine reading time. And I've tried reading them digitally, and I get distracted and go off and do something else.
Courtney?
I get lots of industry magazines, and I get them both in digital and in print because I hate my mailman, and force him to carry tons of magazines to my door every single day. I like, as far as the ones I like this Tech Briefs, which is a publication of NASA, so there's very little advertising in it, and it is always bleeding edge. They cover software, electronics, photonics, and imaging. They have a laser focus world. This is a shoot-off. Motion control, automation, and sensors and test. So if you're a tech head like me, you'll find out about technologies and inventions and chemical processes years ahead of them ever being implemented in products. So you'll be way ahead of everybody else in some technology or innovation in battery developments, et cetera. Also, military and aerospace engineering, subscribe to that. It's free as well. And once you find that you get into a couple of these technical free magazines, you'll suddenly be receiving about 30 of them because they all link and say, oh, well, would you like some subscription to this magazine, which is our sister magazine? And if you say yes, you'll be getting about 30 or 40 a week. So my mailman just loves me.
Alex?
Yeah, I use a lot of industry rags that I get. They're like satellite TV distribution, Mix Magazine, a couple audio ones, a couple of TV ones. I can't think of all of them. I don't have them all right in front of me either, so it's hard for me to remember. I flick through them. Here's the funny thing is, I actually like the ads in the industry magazines because they're like new products and things are released, and it's very vertical, and so you get a lot more. So I get them because of the ads, because the content is. The quality of the content is mixed in most of those magazines. Like, I don't find that. I feel like everything's paid for and everything is kind of like a PR release and everything else, and it's fine. So what's interesting is that I find myself, like, I get this. I wanted to look at the CES, releases of those things, which is really weird. The digital one has like a page turning thing. I wonder if the next generation even knows what that is. Like, what is that page turn thing doing? Why is that happening? But I think that I look at it. I'm just looking at the ads because I usually find that the text feels so like a PR release that I'm almost the entire magazine that I don't find that reading the articles are particularly useful. But I love cutting through and looking at the ads and seeing what new products I should be researching. Harshid?
I don't typically get magazines, but I do use a service called Bard, which is from the National Library Services. So a few magazines that I pick up from there is Consumer Electronics, or what is the other one? The Economist, and Sight and Sound. So those are just a few just to mention as far as magazines are concerned, but I still have access to them. So if anyone that's vision impaired, go ahead and get a NLS account set up for Bard Mobile.
Alex?
One last thing is that almost all of my intake now of the news is over audio, NOAA. and I listen to it all the time. It's a mixture of, I got into it. Here's the funny thing is, I got into it because I subscribed to Foreign Affairs so that I could listen to Foreign Affairs articles. And then I found out that all the audio articles in Foreign Affairs were in NOAA, and Foreign Affairs is expensive and NOAA is not. And so I just got rid of the Foreign Affairs and just stuck with the NOAA because I get the same articles. Because I don't want to read the magazine. And so I mean, I've read Foreign Affairs since I was like 12. So it was, so the idea that I could get it all in audio got me excited. And what got me excited about that is that the subscription that is worth having is The Economist, because The Economist does every single article over audio. And once you get used to listening to them, there's two things. Listening to them while you're doing the dishes or working on something makes everything much more pleasurable, because it's you're doing something dumb, and you can definitely let your mind kind of roam around and listen to things. And also you can listen to it at 1. I find myself 1.8x is about my right. 2 is just a little too fast. 1.75, 1.8 is about the right number. So you can just kind of churn through these articles and really absorb them. I really, I don't, other than looking at those ads in the industry rags, I love audio, news over audio.
Next question.
Paul Wajos from Starling Plaza, Texas says, with the new Samsung S24, you can turn any video into 120 frames per second slow motion video after the fact. And it has a boatload of AI features and is $1,299. What's your impression of yesterday's announcement?
Harshid?
So the impression is this much. I have S22 right here. It works pretty much the same. We all always want better features, better things. So the fact that they've grabbed the AI Gemini from Bard, from Google's side of the pool, they have to pay for that, right? So it's not free technically to use Bard, or excuse me, AI on the phone. But overall, I mean, it's just a upgrade. And as far as the photo quality and all that goes, Samsung's always going to push that. They have competition with the Pixel, with how they are doing photo generation and doing better with that end. So both phones, old or new, I mean, they're going to run the same. I'm sure I'll have AI on my S22 Ultra. So it's, if you have the money, go for it. If not, skip it.
Alex?
Yeah, I don't quite understand why they put that in there. I mean, the technology has gotten to be normal enough that I'm sure that they're able to throw money at it. All this is doing is adding frames in between. There's a lot of things. Topaz AI and a lot of things will do it, but it's nice that you can do it on the phone. I don't know how many people are going to use it. I really felt like they did that because, as Harshid kind of alluded to, there are so few new features on the new Samsung. It was like, and now we're going to add something because we didn't have anything. I mean, this got very close to like when Apple. I always make fun of Apple when they go, "It's our best iPhone ever," and I always want this, some version of it. Like, this year was hard, and so it's not quite as good as the last one, but we're doing the best we can. I felt like the Samsung announcement was really close to that. We're not making any major updates, but we gave you 120 frames a second, which 1% of you might use.
Courtney?
Actually, I think they did give a lot of updates, but all the updates they gave are coming from Google, So right. With the Gemini and the multi-input chatbot, basically, so you could input images, and it's basically similar to what the Google search engine with a Google Glass, used to be Google Glass. Now it's where you can take a picture of something, and now you can point at something or circle something within the picture, and it will do an AI research and tell you what that is or where you can buy it, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of handy. But across the three phones I was looking at, and the Ultra is the expensive one, the $1,200. But the $1,000, which is the 24 Plus, and the $800 or $800, which is the S24, really have all the same AI features across the board. Even though the only difference is, I think there's an NPU in the Ultra, which would speed up on device AI stuff, but so it'll be a little bit slower because it's going to have to go to the cloud on the other two, but it still offers the same services. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer for it to give you a response. So I think any of them would be a good result, but now I think Google then came out the next day and said that they have an app or a plugin that works across all our phones, are actually all Android phones, that gives you most of those same features of being able to selectively point out something and circle something in a picture and have it report back as to what that is or where you can get it, etc.
Nigel?
I think my impression of the announcement was Samsung saying to its audience, if you bought a Samsung, you did the right thing. If you're in the Android ecosystem, please keep buying Samsung phones. And I think that's what that announcement was about. They're not going to convert anyone. You know, the feature that is, circle and it will search for you. It looks great. It looks very clever. At some point, we're going to have it on all phones. And then you ask yourself, how often am I going to do it?
Alex?
And I think that Samsung is trying to stem the bleeding because they are definitely bleeding users, and that's a problem for them right now. Not just to Apple, but this is the first year Apple overtook them, but it's to a lot of the other Chinese manufacturers are taking larger things, and so Samsung's percentage of the market is definitely crunching, and so I think they have to do something every year to stay up there. But it really felt like they didn't have a lot to offer this time.
Next question.
Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri wants to know, can anyone speak with authority on genlock in the Blackmagic ecosystem? Designing a system with Blackmagic design cams, decks, Hyperdecks, a Videohub, and an ATEM, attempting to incorporate genlock, finding it confusing.
Alex?
This is a whole second hour. Please put this into the second hour in Discord, or someone please put it in, and we'll put it in. We'll get it in very soon, possibly very, very soon, to talk about it, because it'd be hard to talk about right now off the cuff, because I think we do need some diagrams for you to understand exactly how we're tying those together. But we will. It's a great subject for a second hour. I don't know why we haven't done it, but we will do it soon. So throw that in the second hour suggestions, and we'll go from there.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, I saw a video of Rick Allen, of radio fame, recording a station ID with a classic Sonovox. Could a vocoder, hardware or plugin, recreate the same effect?
Alex?
Probably, but it wouldn't be the same. I think that a lot of times when we do these effects, it just wouldn't have. There's an analog thing that happens here that I think it won't be the same if you do it digitally. You could get something that's close. It might be good enough, but it's not going to be the thing.
All right, next question.
Craig McFarland from Boston, Massachusetts. Any thoughts about Figma's Creator Micro keypad for $139 US? It is a collaboration with Work Louder, a maker of interesting creator keyboards.
I took a look at this online. It looks like it's you said $140. It's a little kind of looks like a quad directional keypad with a knob. As somebody who likes to fidget and play, I mean, this is right up my alley. But we'll see what Nigel, what do you have to think?
I like the look of it, and I initially tried to. Then I remember I have 3 Stream Decks, so I find the Stream Decks between Companion and the base Stream Deck seems to me a good answer. I will tell you though that the Stream Deck Plus, which I almost never use. They've yet to really make at least in my workflow, make the dials and the squiggly bits work well. But Stream Deck seems to solve this problem.
Only 3? Just 3? That's all? Alex, go ahead.
There's so many keyboards on that site. I was like, I'm a little bit of a keyboard dweeb, and I was like, I want to buy all of these keyboards. Like they have these larger full size keyboards. This is one of the this is their Nomad, and I was like, it's got a little screen in it. It's got little dials. It's like it has a lot of the little bits and pieces that are there. This is the Figma Micro. Their website doesn't work very well. So this is a horrible website. Anyway, but this is the little Micro, which is cool, the little dial, and it's cool. But I was looking, I immediately went to Excel, of course, and was just like, look at this keyboard with the, for doing like work and having dials. And if you're using it as a control system, I was kind of, I have to admit that I thought it was pretty, everything's for pre-order, so they must have just come out, but they're all probably 3D renders. They're like, this is what it'll look like when we're done. But anyway, it's cool.
I'm so hesitant to find another company that makes really good keyboards that I'm going to like, because I have way more Keychrons that I could possibly justify. Like, it's like, oh, what about this keyboard? What about this knob?
My thing is that I really want it to be I really want to be quiet. So I got this one that isn't quite what I want, but it's quiet. So if I need to type during meetings, this is the best I can do for quiet. There's a company that makes a glass one, but it looks like they haven't updated it. Caslon, I think, makes one that's glass. But I've been really trying to find one that I can take notes and type during meetings. This one's not quite the answer, but it is roll up and waterproof, I think. So it's kind of fun, and it is quiet. But I haven't totally gotten it integrated into my system yet. And it's $25, so it wasn't expensive. But I really want one that's quiet, like makes no noise while I type. Like I would pay $350 for something that made no noise while I type. None. Like no noise. And I can't find one other than that glass one. And that I want one that moves. Like I have a DOS keyboard, and I want the DOS keyboard with, and I don't mean quiet, I mean silent. And that I'd pay a premium for that.
Don't let anybody fool you when you're reading about the red switches and the brown switches and the blue switches. The blue switches are definitely the loudest, but the red ones are quieter. They're not quiet.
Not quieter. Deborah Woodfork mentioned that Newfie keyboards are pretty good. I really do want Newfies, but they're still not as quiet, and I can't justify buying them otherwise. The Newfies are gorgeous keyboards, and our EVS operator got me hooked on. I didn't even know they existed, and she pulls out this really cool keyboard, and I'm like, what is that? So like a new keyboard I haven't seen before. So Newfies are great too.
Christmas a few years ago, all I wanted was a DOS keyboard, and I special requested the one that was blank. That had no printing on the keycaps. And I loved it because anytime somebody else sat down at my station, they just went, oh.
Yeah. There you go. I could never survive that.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond from Chicago, Illinois says, Sonoma, safe to update to 14.2.1?
Alex?
I haven't done my main computer. I've updated all the other computers. So all my other computers are on Sonoma. They all seem to be working fine, but I have to check with Oliver, actually, to make sure that Mimo is going to work okay when I switch over. There's nothing that's going to surprise me there. Usually that one's using some subsystems, and also it's things like loopback and stuff like that. But it all seems to be working. So I'm letting it run on these, but so far so good. On the and there are some, obviously some things that they're doing that drive me a little crazy because it's a new operating system, but I'm kind of letting them settle in and letting myself get used to them before I turn my main studio, my Mac studio, into a Sonoma box. It's still on Ventura, but the Sonoma is on all the other computers and it's working fine.
Next question.
Paul Walhus from Starling Plaza, Texas asks, what's the best utility van for mobile productions?
Alex?
Part of it depends on whether you're building into it or whether you're actually going to use it to move gear. So in either case, what I would say is a Ford Transit van is what I had two of those, and I'm really happy with them. So the Ford Transit vans, I got the extra long and the extra high, and in both cases, you could turn that into a production unit as far as a van. The only problem with the extra high is that it is, I think, 9 feet high, and it can go over what you can park into certain parking garages. So you have to think about that, but it's got a lot more headroom for that. So we had two of those, and what we did is by the second one we had figured out how to do this. So it's extra. It was extra high, extra long. We got a Tommy lift on the back that folded. And when Marty Brennes put that in, when it folded, I was like, why did you put one in that folds? So nice, because you can still open one of the back doors the Tommy lift spins up on one side and you can still open another door. It was key. And Marty was like, trust me, you'll like this one when it works. And so the Tommy lift is really key because then you can get things in and out. Transforms how the van works, is to have a lift on the back. And then you do want a camera on the back. That's an extra feature. You need it. There's a downward camera that they don't all come with. Another thing is thinking about how you're going to do the locking systems. Make sure you don't get any windows. What we did is we put 3 lanes. I was trying to find it before I got to this question, but I didn't quite get to it. 3 lanes of E-track that went down the sides. So these are the things that when you cinch up, when you're doing when you're working with a van, and you're filling it with gear. The thing is that you have to, I just updated this and now I can't get my pen out. Let's see here. So what happens is that when you think about your van here like this, one of the things that happens is that every time you put a set of cases in, you actually want to draw, you want to pull a line and attach it. You got to figure out what you're going to attach it to. And so what you do is, if you look at it from the side, you'll have these tracks that go down the side, and then you have these webbing, this ratchet straps that will go right into these. And so you put a set of cases and you just keep on, adding these to keep it there. You never want to load a truck up that big without cinching it at every level. Otherwise, everything starts moving around, and then the truck falls over. And so it's like, so don't do that. And so those E-tracks are super powerful. The Tommy lift on the back, and then up, make it high. Now you can turn that into a production truck. You can put 80/20 in there, and you can build it all out, and you put monitors in there. A little cramped. I mean, we had a trailer that we did that with, a 24-foot Marketech trailer, and that worked really well. The problem with the van is the wheel hubs. When you put production into a van, the wheel hubs get in the way. They get a little in the way when you load them, but they get into a lot in the way when because if you're on a like a box truck, usually those wheel hubs, unless you're buying a rental or renting one, but if you get a real box truck at dock height, that whole plane will be above the wheels, and then it's all nice and flat. But otherwise, you're dealing with wheel hubs, and that doesn't work as well, in my opinion, with production. It was a little bit of a pain also with the production trailer that we had, which is basically a toy hauler that they put a bunch of stuff into.
Nigel?
Yeah, if you're actually in the market for one, I would check the secondhand market. I have to tell you, getting vans and commercial vehicles has become both very expensive and very difficult. There are a lot of manufacturers that are pulling out of this market, and we would have used Nissans, we would have used all sorts of things. They're just disappearing. The way that car manufacturers are being fundamentally sponsored to go and build EV cars that they can't sell has really destroyed the whole of the commercial van, particularly the low-end commercial van market. So if you are in the market, really check secondhand, because unless you're going to do something like Alex did, which is almost a speciality build, you're going to find it a very commercial, very costly thing to do.
Alex? And to put it in perspective, our van was our second one that was done all the right ways was like $70,000. Like it was not like a cheap little van, but we used it all day, every day. It was great. Nigel's point is very, very spot on. One of the problems is the way we tax things is just to bring vans in and out is insane. So when they bring the vans in, if it's a cargo van, the tariffs are different than if it's a regular van. So they literally put the seats into the van to go through customs, and they take the seats out, and then they make them storage. It's just dumb. It's like a lot of dumb people doing dumb things. Anyway.
Next question.
From Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. What are the panel's favorite non-Velcro cable ties and why?
Go ahead, TJ.
Well, them's fighting words for me because all of my cable ties are Velcro. Let me tell you, and literally Velcro brand Velcro cable ties. The only one that I have 4 of them. It's a bungee cord that has a ball on one end that you kind of loop around the cable and then hook over the ball. And I only use that when I'm doing larger bundles of cable that weigh a significant amount.
Alex?
Mickey had talked about bongo ties. Definitely something I've used in the past. I actually use some zip ties to do these, but I do them. They're usually wider, and I do them by hand. There's a gun. When I used to do it in the early days, you sit there and just pull them, and you can set the tension usually on the gun so that it's not pulling in on the cables. But it's a really dangerous thing to do, and if you're not really, you will do it. You will use them when you're doing installations because you need to have it look nice and clean, and you have to have those in there. And when you have a bundle of cables, it puts less pressure on each cable, but you got to be very careful of that tension, because if you pull it in, you're going to change the way the cable works. And so you have to be super careful about how you tie those together. But otherwise, other than Velcro, I mean, I will say Velcro is like 98%, 99% of what I do. I think the bongo ties that Mickey had suggested, he's got a couple other suggestions in the chat as well.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, how can you ensure that as a community grows and reaches a wider audience, it still retains its core values and positive atmosphere?
Nigel?
I think a question before answering it is, why are you trying to grow your audience? What is the benefit you're trying to see? What are you trying to do? You've got to be really sure you know why you're trying to grow your audience, because having the right reasons for doing that, big difference. the core of this thing is, if you don't know why you're trying to grow the audience, you don't know what mission you're trying to serve, what your vision for the future is, if you haven't articulated the real cornerstones of that community, then as it grows, it'll fall apart. But if you can get those things together and be really clear on your mission, your vision, what your objectives are, and then you're clear about why you're trying to expand that. If it's, I want to be more famous, that's a different thing. But a real community needs to have a reason for growth. And if you don't have the base things locked in, then when you grow, you'll die.
Harshid?
I'm going to use an example of my nonprofit that I work with. Is called iBug Today. And the reason why we keep going is the sheer fact that we're giving support to people. So your audience tends to become your community, right? And so if you're feeding people the things they want to learn and want to be around, your community is obviously going to grow for exponentially with the mindset of you're giving something to your audience that they want to listen to or they want to come back to. And the core factors of a community is the fact that you have an audience, right? You have people that are willing to keep coming back to your maybe this show, maybe my iBug show with Android, but it's all about your people. And if you treat your people right, they'll treat you right. And so the community aspects are, for one, is the content that you're delivering to them something that they want to learn? And number two is, when you have your community, what is the parameters or the rules to avoid riffraff, right? So what is some of the hardships that you might give someone to join a group, right? Because you might have to go around the park and around the ocean and, then you could join the group. But there's a reason for that, right? To keep the riffraff out. So I think the best way to look at a community is that's your audience. If you want to gain your audience in the music space, well, you're going to invite a lot of people that are in that particular niche. And to keep the community going, be kind. Let's drop the swearing words and things like that. So kindness and paying attention to your audience is going to be a huge factor for your community.
Alex?
What we've done here is, in general, no religion, no politics, no swearing. keep it clean, keep it respectful. It doesn't always work, but I think that unless politics is your business, like that's what you're discussing, or religion, politics, religion, and swearing are just things that are unnecessary in a community, and it's really easy for people to see how they're different as opposed to how they're the same when they go into those things, and they really are a bit of a distraction from building a community. And so I would recommend that. I also use, as people know here, I use real names in Discord, and we won't, unless we have something that looks like a real name, we won't let you talk or see very much. And we have found that to be probably one of the most effective things, not because suddenly you use a real name and you're more respectful. It's because the people who are the most trouble won't give us their real name. And so if they don't give us their real name, then usually you just know that they're going to be problematic. Not all of them, but enough of them that it's worth doing. So you also have to be willing to say, well, I'm not going to have everybody show up. We're going to set the rules. We're making it available for everyone, but they do have to follow a certain set of guidelines, or we're not going to try to accommodate all of them. So I think that's something that you have to kind of keep looking at. And then I would say that it's constant. It's a constant work. You can never assume that you're going to be able to lean back on it. If you're going to build a community and you actually care about it, it's going to take a lot of. That's why we have, for instance, Sundays, where it's pretty much, we don't stream it, but it's pretty much anybody can ask any of those questions. That's us having, constantly tending to what's going on for folks and having those discussions. They may not all agree with what we talk about, but they'll at least know why we're doing it. There's usually a reason.
Next question.
Henny Ramos from Yonkers, New York asks, suggestion for middle-of-the-road, cost-effective lav mic for Rode Go 2 with better bass response. Rode Lav sounds thin for local recording.
Alex?
I realized that I don't know if the one that I was going to suggest is actually going to work. I don't know if there's a converter for it. When I think of lavs that are kind of not super expensive but effective, oftentimes I'm thinking about an MX150 from Shure. We had a lot of those, and I will admit that I don't have a ton of respect for lavs, so I think that's part of it. Sanken is another lav that we've used a fair bit. So those are the two that I probably use the most. I don't really like lavs that much, so I don't use them as much. But when we've leaned into them, we've tended to buy the MX150s from Shure or the Sankens. have been the two most popular ones, unless we're doing them in a lot of feedback environments, and then we're using the Shure WL185s and 184s. But those are dangerous to use. Like, just know that they're not pretty, and if they get a little off axis, you're not going to be able to hear anything.
Harshid?
I was recently watching Podcastage, and he had the Sony lav mics, which sounded really good for what they're worth, and I think they might fit your need for that bass response, because you're right that the Go's do sound a little thin. So try to YouTube that, or maybe I'll drop it in after hours discussion for you in Discord.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would there be an equivalent to Rogue Amoeba sound source that can handle multi-channel audio devices? I've seen Ginger Audio's Sphere, but it is very expensive.
Nigel?
I don't know if you played with Sound Desk. I don't know if it'll quite do what you want, but I use Sound Source every day on all my machines. I really like it. I did play with the Sound Desk one that Fenwick was doing with the Nano Connect, but it's great. It works really well. It just doesn't work well in my workflow.
And worth noting that Sound Desk is Loud Lab, not Rogue Amoeba. Next question.
From Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Enjoyed the fireside chat with Colleen Henry this week. Noticed she had a mic on her cheek, which her hair was rubbing much of the show. No noise. Was this the on-air mic used?
Sorry, I didn't. I forgot to put my hand up. Yeah, so that was a Countryman H6, and that she had there. I just think it wasn't rubbing enough. It was just a little bit of hair there that didn't bother the mic. But that was definitely the sound. Oh, and she had original sound was turned off as well, so it probably just pulled it off. So I think that was the case. A lot of times when we don't know if someone's going to be really set up for it, we recommend turning the original sound off. And letting Zoom does a pretty good job of creating a clean signal. so we let that happen more often than we used to. It's gotten much better as far as how that goes.
Next question.
From Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida. Jeff says, Alex, you've shown a little 3 or 4 button USB keypad. Did you have to download their proprietary software to program the buttons?
Alex? It's an aspirational purchase. You'll notice that there's no cable on it yet. It just sits here going, I got to figure out how to use that. So I bought it to replace this, I just want to use this somewhere else. This is my Stream Deck, and I use this Stream Deck to control Keynote. So when I do presentations, I want my keyboard controlling one computer. I want to be able to advance slides on another computer. And so as a result, I was using this little Stream Deck, but I was like, it's got 3 more buttons than I need and everything else. And so I got this. It's a lot less expensive. And it's literally sitting here waiting for me to figure it out. So I think I have to download their software, but I haven't done it yet.
Samuel?
Yeah, I've used little buttons or pedals that you can press on the with your feet, and that Chinese one, and you have to download a little software, and you just load the keyboard shortcut, what you want to use inside the software, and load it into the device, and then it works every time, just as a keyboard, just for that button.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, the Espresso Pro 17 4K portable monitor has 450 nits of peak brightness. Are nits mostly an issue for HDR, or can they matter for other use cases?
Alex?
It's mostly HDR. I would say that 450 is just barely HDR. So it's 450 is nice and bright, but it's not that impressive. I don't. If I had 450 nits, I'm not even sure I would list it. Other than just giving it as a technical term, I wouldn't promote it.
Next question.
Andre Dalai from Berlin says, Alex, what's the spiral style thing on your back above the iMac? Looks interesting.
Do tell.
Good catch. I put it up there. I'm very proud of it. This here is what he's talking about here. It's hard for me to go grab it. Maybe if you ask this again on Sunday, I'll run back and grab it and pull it up. This is a traditional or semi-traditional Rwandan artwork that's done. I don't know if this one is or not, but traditionally it's made out of cow dung, and then painted. I'm not sure if it still is or not. It's well contained. It doesn't smell. So, but they are really, I think that they're just beautiful, and they make lots of different designs, and you can get them oftentimes at shops and in Kigali, Rwanda. And that one, I was spelunking through my garage. And, I buy a lot of things in Africa, and I put them in boxes and think I'm going to put them somewhere. And I opened that one up, and I was like, oh, here it is. And I was like, this will be perfect in my background. And then I figured somebody at some point will ask what it is, and then I'll get to explain it. So there it is. There it is.
I had my money on resolution chart. I was so ready.
Nope.
I failed.
It's a traditional Rwandan art, which I think is beautiful.
That's so cool. All right, next question.
From Paul Walhus in Starling Plaza, Texas. Who was the winner, or who was subscriber 5,000 on the Office Hours YouTube channel and winner of the FX3?
Alex.
I just want to point out, number one, I don't know. And number two is I never promised an FX3. I always said it was a bad idea. So I don't know who it is. But we're cruising towards 10 now. So we're on our way to 10,000 and just cooking right along at about, 5 or 10 a day. So there you go.
Next question.
From Michael Anderson in Jackson, Wyoming. Opinions of using Blackmagic Proxy Generator versus Apple Compressor for generating proxy files.
Alex?
I've had a lot of trouble with Blackmagic's Proxy Creator where I have sync issues. So I generate things in proxies inside of Resolve, and then I do the edit so that it'll be faster. And then when I relink them and go back, and when I render them, my cuts aren't in the same place that they were before with the proxies. I don't use the Apple compressor. Generally, that's why I like so much drive space, is when I'm cutting with my in Resolve, I've kind of stopped using the proxies because I was having so much trouble with them. So that's I know that's not really answering your question, but that's what I ended up doing because of the issues that I was having.
Next question.
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia says, does anyone use the Sound Desk companion apps Sonic Atom or Fluctus?
Alex?
I haven't used Fluctus. I use Sonic Atom. We use Sonic Atom. It's good. It's not as good as Spectre. Spectre is sold as a group with Synaptic sells it, and I bought that many years ago. It's still 2 or 3 times as good as Sonic Atom, but Sonic Atom is the easiest one to buy, the least expensive one, and it's a great and with SoundDesk, Sonic Atom works incredibly well because SoundDesk, you just put it in as a filter, and you can now have all these scopes and everything else. So it's really useful. And again, if I was going to recommend something, I'd say Sonic Atom. If you really want to get geeky about it, I still think Spectre is a better solution.
I never had really good audio scopes before. I always had just a dumb level meter. I would pay attention to video scopes. When I put up Sonic Atom, after Chris Fenwick did his thing, and I just had that on my screen, and I started watching what did all of my meters look like compared to everyone else's, and how did it react when I tweaked it, I learned so much. It was just...
That's the biggest thing with scopes is being able to see in real time. And when you notice something, here's what's powerful about scopes always being up. When you see something, you go, oh, that is or when you hear something or see something and it's not right, you look over at the scopes and you start to register what the scopes are doing when you see something that you like or don't like. And what happens is you really get good at that. The big thing that we used, of course, is I never say it right, but I want to say the Leisure meter. I know I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but that's what happens when you read books about it all the time, which will tell me whether whether I have the polarities correct on my stereo channels. So I use that a lot. I use a lot of level history. Level history lets me see, I can look at 20 rooms, and if I see, and we can color them, the fill. So it's filling red or orange or purple or green or whatever, and we know where we're at just looking across at all of them. And I use spectrograph and spectrogram because I can see, where things are happening, especially spectrogram. You can see lines that are like buzzes and stuff like that. If you look across, you see a line going across your spectrogram, you know that you've got a line, something like a ground loop or something like that. So they're super, super useful.
Next question.
Paul Walhus from Starling Plaza, Texas says, Sony just changed photography forever by releasing the Sony A9 III, the world's first global shutter camera. Agree?
Samuel?
Well, not really. The global shutter has been around for quite a while, and Sony actually had some cameras for about 10 years ago that they used global shutter, but they went away from it because they had some issues with dynamic range and low light. I actually watched Gerald Undon's video where he reviewed the sensor, and he said that both the dynamic range and the low light was a little bit worse, or the noise levels was a little bit worse than a similar Sony camera, but it probably won't be something that you'll notice in practical. So I don't think it's really like a game changer like this. Of course, in the Sony it is, but the real target for this here camera is I think the Olympics. This is a sports camera, and if you look at the Sony lines, then the A series is all about speed, so it's like has a large buffer, and for cameras, so that's like the main focus of this camera.
Alex?
Yeah, I also think that I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen one even in that price range that does global shutter. Red has had their own that are doing global shutters in the past. So I do think that we're seeing a movement towards global shutter, and while it may have some lower dynamic range and possibly a little bit more grain, it really solves a lot of things when the cameras are bouncing around and doing action films. I would love to talk to Gareth Edwards about, I was talking to somebody about this last night, that I don't understand how he shot Creator with an FX3 with a rolling shutter. Like it seems like there's a lot of action scenes there, and it feels like you get some rubber, in the rubber in the shot. But he hasn't, I don't think anyone's asked him about that specifically, but hopefully we'll get him on the show. We'll see what we can do.
Samuel?
Yeah, there's two things that they can do to eliminate global shutter. The first thing is to use a true global shutter. The second thing is to have a higher readout speed, so it's almost as a global shutter. For example, the FX3 has about 8 milliseconds readout, but some of the higher end Sony cameras, like the Burano and the Venice, they also have global rolling shutter, but it's extremely high readout, so it's like almost similar to a global shutter. So you could argue that it is a global shutter, but it's a rolling shutter.
Next question.
Zach Stahlsmith from Chautauqua, New York says, has anyone ordered cameras directly from PTZ Optics, or do they only use third-party sellers like B&H?
Alex?
I think PTZ Optics, a lot of companies they won't sell directly because they want the reseller network to exist. So there's a lot of advantages to them to, if they do it all, or if the resellers feel like they're competing with them, they're like, oh, they don't want to resell it, or they don't push it as hard. By knowing that they have, but when you set up a reseller network of companies that are selling it, they have a better reason to sell your product forward. So I don't think that PTZ Optics sells it, and there's a lot of companies that only sell it in small amounts. Like Sound Devices is another one. I think they generally don't sell except for third parties. Countryman, another one, the company that like that. And there's a lot in the professional world. There's a lot of companies that are like that won't sell directly. You sell it through there, and that means they also, a lot of the customer service and value add is pushed out to them, and they don't have to manage it on their own.
Next question.
Andre Dalai in Berlin. What program should I learn to generate custom animated lower thirds?
Alex?
It depends. What are you going to do with them? So the question really is: Are you trying to do live lower thirds that are updating all the time, or are you trying to do or are you trying to just build ones that you can play out? If you're building ones that are play out, it's really hard to get past. If you're on a Mac, it's really hard to get past Motion. Motion is a $50 app, and the behaviors and all the other things will make it really easy for you to generate. There's and you can generate them in ProRes with alpha channels and everything else that you want. So if that may be the case at a really low cost, I built a lot using just Luma keys and Keynote for a very long time that you can put those together. After Effects is obviously a very popular one to use for building those lower thirds. So those are some other things to think about. There are some, then if you start getting into, I want to do live lower thirds, now you're really talking about, again, in the cost-effective place, Mimo Live will do it. A lot of these other, vMix, I know some people that use that for those. But then you're talking really, as you start to ratchet up, VizRT, of course, is still one of the big ones. Chiron, Expression's probably a little bit more affordable. So these are the other ones that you can kind of think about on the high end. But if you're just starting to learn to generate them, think about that. There's also Softron also makes a lower third product. True Blue is another one that makes them in a more affordable area. So there's a lot of different ones. It depends on whether you're trying to do live updates or whether you're trying to render them out and play them out.
And just to echo some advice that we gave a little earlier in this year to talk about how to learn lower thirds is if you find a website that will give you a motion template or will give you an After Effects template, download it and start to pick it apart and find out what they're doing. And then that's going to be one of the easiest ways to see what is possible. And then when you really want to challenge yourself, you find that lower third that you like that's on broadcast somewhere and you make it pixel perfect and recreate it. And it's a project, but that's going to be how you're learning. Next question.
Dex Dahlsmith from Chautauqua, New York says, is anyone on the panel using the trigger function in Companion in their workflow? I use it to launch vMix, toggle audio channels on my X32, and push the stream out, but sometimes the triggers don't fire. Any ideas?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, I've used triggers quite a bit and sometimes, but you have to think about it, how you want to use it, because a trigger will fire something determined on action, so it can often fire things when you don't want it to happen. So you have to use it with care. When they say they don't fire, then try to add a little bit delay between them if you have a whole bunch of them, because sometimes they can. Sometimes if you try to process all of them at once, then they won't fire maybe the last one, for example. So try putting a little bit delay between the actions.
Next question.
Tim Snyder from Louisville, Kentucky says, is there a way to get rid of vignetting on older or wider lenses on the Ursa broadcasts? It seems that anything wider than 8mm creates vignetting, maybe shimming.
Alex?
The most common place that we see this is oftentimes with using B4 lenses onto a broadcast, especially the new broadcast. So the older broadcast was a 2/3 inch sensor, and you probably didn't see as much of it. If you're using the newer broadcast, those are Super 35, and that sensor is larger than what the lens was designed for. So there's a couple different ways to handle that. There are some converters, and I can't think of the name of them. They're not the raw B4 converters, but there's some that will convert the 2/3 field to a Super 35 field. They're a lot more expensive. They might cost as much as some of your lenses to do that conversion because it's a glass conversion from one to the next. The other way to do it is do a crop sensor. It's not going to give you 4K at that point, but if you crop the sensor, you're going to get less depth of field or more depth of field. But you can crop past that vignette. But there's not any kind of other way to manage it that I know of.
Next question.
And our final question today from Chester Sweeney via the QR code in Las Vegas, Nevada. I recently went back into my DVD collection to celebrate the new year, and I chose to watch Coneheads, and I want to point out the fireworks scene and how they tell the story by showing less as opposed to more theatrics.
Harshid?
Well, this would be a great title to rewatch for myself in audio description if it's available. So it is interesting to take less of the video, but with the acting and expressions to, get a scene pushed across. So I think if that has audio description, thank you for bringing that title up again in my brain, and would love to see that.
It might have been Hitchcock that said it, but never show the monster. It's always going to be in your imagination a little bit punchier than if you're displaying what it should be. But anyway, we got one more that snuck in. Why don't we get last question?
From Michael Tan in San Diego, California. Any camera suggestions for wide shot and permanent installation in a church environment? Thanks.
Alex?
I would still use a PTZ. So think about what you can afford in the PTZ. You may have it as a wide shot, but being able to move it around. Bird Dog is a good one with NDI and a lot of other options there. Of course, you can start going higher up into the Canon 500s or even to bigger ones. I wouldn't use actually a Sony FR7. I'd probably go towards the BRC 1000s or the Panasonic 150s. are great to have a single camera back there. You're going to have a good lens. You're going to have a long throw. The BRC 1000s and the Panasonics will have like a 20x throw, so you can get close-ups if you need them. So those are some things to think about. Those are more on the expensive end. Bird Dog and some of the other ones are going to be on a less expensive end, but still put a PTZ back there so that you can make adjustments.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap another fantastic Saturday. Thanks, everybody. This was a lot of fun. Thank you to our producers, you guys and girls. Without putting your questions into us, then we would have a really short show and wouldn't have a lot to talk about. And if we didn't have this great panel here to answer those questions, it would be a really long 2 hours for for us too. So thank you for everyone submitting questions. Thank you for those answering. And finally, thank you to our awesome crew on the back end who's making this show happen every single day, the small village that wakes up 7 days a week. It's just amazing. A reminder, in about 10 minutes, we're going to have the new volunteer meeting. So if you are curious about how you can volunteer and contribute to the community here, look for a link in Discord for that. And to wrap up with our Tlaloc traversal today, we had 64,000 miles. That's 103,000 kilometers, which is more than 508 million bananas for scale. Let's jump into After Hours.
Great work, CJ.
Thank you.
Good job.
The transition was perfect.
Finally. It's so hard.
Nailed it.
It's hard. Yeah. The key is to also sound like you're not in a rush. You're not in a rush and you're not hanging out too long. So you're just like, and now we're going to jump into the second hour, and then it goes, whew, and it's got
to be a beat.
Like, oh, yeah, that's what
Feels good.
About. I get that
no.
once a week. The rest of them are like blah, 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 blah. Land. So
Some of us only get one shot a week.
I know.
You got to make it count.
Yeah, exactly. All right. See everybody in a couple minutes.
Cheers. See you later.